Welcome to another episode of A Come Together. We are back. I'm going to do a solo episode. I've actually tried to do a couple of these in the last couple of weeks, and for some reason, it's been really challenging for me. I just went 16 minutes and realized that none of it sounded good, and it was all just a bunch of incoherent rambling. So hopefully, on take two, I'll have my thoughts a little bit more in order, and can have a little bit better content for myself and for you guys. So I haven't done a solo episode in a long time. Like I just said, thank God the podcast has been doing really, really well. It's been busy. I haven't needed to do solo episodes. I've really been stocked up with guests, and I'm really trying to make the most of that. And I'm really trying to use that as an opportunity to, you know, again, the reason why I wanted to pull back on solo episodes a little bit is because I didn't want the listeners to have to scroll through a ton of my own solo episodes in order to get to the interesting guest episodes. I consider my guest episodes to be way more interesting and way more useful than my solo episodes. Um, Today, it's going to be kind of a stream of conscious episode, I think, and those are always, I think, a lot of fun if as long as you're able to keep your thoughts in order, and kind of keep a train of thought for an extended period of time. And there's a lot of things that I feel very emotionally strongly about that's just going on. And the world is crazy. The news is crazy. I was just traveling for the last bunch of weeks, in and out of the country, Florida, New York, Israel, Amsterdam, Barcelona. And, I have a 2-month-old daughter. I think that the last solo episode that I recorded was prior to her being born. So, just there's so much going on, and there's so many different things in my head, and I haven't really had the opportunity to kind of, articulate any of it and to really be eloquent about it. And I've kind of just been living and going through all these motions, but I haven't been really able to kind of sit and really soak in them and really try to, feel them out and talk them out. So I don't even know where to start. I guess I'll start with the fact that my family, my wife and my kids, have been in New York most of the summer, for the last month and change, month or so, I would say. And it's hard for me to be back in New York. It's hard for me because the way that I feel like my time is spent here is super different from the way that my time is spent in Florida. And, and aside from the fact that it just happens to be that things are literally further apart from one another. Like my life in Florida, the circle of what my life consists of is a much smaller, like actual physical space. Um, but in New York, New York is a a massive state, and we have family and friends all over, right? So if I want to go to my sister for a weekend, it's a 4-hour drive. That's the equivalent of going to Naples, in Florida for me. And that's something I do very often because it does throw apart my whole schedule, and it's hard for me to, to kind of get back into things. The other factor, of course, is that I'm not in my own home, and I'm not in and I think that all people, but especially myself, are very, very much a product of their environment, and different environments have different associations within our own heads and with our own selves, and so for me to be in Florida, I have that kind of association. I have the spot where I sit, where I work, and I have the spot where I sit, where I record my podcasts, and I have X, Y, and Z in certain places and certain times. I do this, and this, and I have a whole routine that allows me to kind of, I work within the confines of a routine in order to be the most productive. But that routine and the whole schedule kind of gets thrown out the window here, and instead it's just chaos, and I'm trying to navigate and be productive within the chaos. That being said, um, this is not the first time that I'm having this issue and I'm having this challenge in my life. I've periodically, moved away from home and then come back for different periods of time, and every single time I come back, it does take me time to kind of get back into the swing of things and really kind of overcome that. And one of the things that I always have to tell myself, and that I'm saying out loud now, is the notion that if I'm really as productive as I think I am, and if I'm really as disciplined as I think I am, then my source of productivity can't come from the outside, from where I am. It's got to come from the inside, from who I am. Which is why I'm doing take two after talking for 16 minutes straight of another podcast that I will hopefully go on for another about half an hour or so, for 40 minutes. We'll see. And I think there will be a lot to talk about. But that was just one thing that was that's on my mind. That's always on my mind, is kind of your environment where you are, and also the people that you're with too, the people that you talk to and the people that you spend time with. Um, and that's why at different points in my life, depending on what I was going through, I've had to talk to some people more and some people less. And there's very few consistent friends that I've had that, that kind of stick with me throughout any kind of path in life, from high school to college to, to my professional career, to living in New York or Florida, or getting married or having kids. And, and I find different friends almost based on like what aspect of life, what part of life that I'm in. And I'm always looking for friends that I look up to, not that look up to me, but people that, that I could really try to benefit something from them, try to benefit, learn from a healthy marriage, or a healthy relationship with their kids, or a good, or that they're very driven in terms of work or creative. And I like to surround myself with those type of people. Yeah. So anyway, so one of those friends is my buddy Avrami Crow, Charles Crow, as he now goes by. Um, and he has been there my whole life, not my whole life, but since about 10th grade in high school. And he just got married. And even though I just had a daughter 2 months ago, and when I went to his wedding, she was a month and a half old, I could not be there. I absolutely had to go. So my buddy Zach Alexander, friend of the pod, also been on the pod 2 or 3 times. Um, Zach and I flew together to Israel for the week to Avrami's wedding. And I have so many different thoughts about the war, and about what's going on in the news, and even about visiting there, because I've never been to a country that's been in a war, and when 9/11 happened, I was, I mean, I was, I think maybe I was 4 or 5 years old. I literally have no recollection of anything happening. I don't remember my parents taking me home. I don't remember the school talking about it. Like, certain, even a lot of my friends remember everything. For some reason, I really don't remember much. Um, and I was too young and, not conscious enough to realize, the kind of, feeling that there was in the country, get the national mood of, of, mourning, and the national mood of wanting to fight back, and the national mood of, let's get those sons of bitches that got us, like they, I wasn't there for any of that. And so I've never really been in a country that's been in a war. And so, it was really, 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 really fascinating. Um, Before I get into that, I wanted to, and I want to preface my take, I think, or my opinion or my experience, with a couple of different thoughts or ideas. So right now, I feel, it's a scary time to be Jewish, and a supporter of Israel in today's world. And part of the reason, and there's a couple of different reasons for that. There's the obvious first reason, which is blatant anti-Semitism, which sucks, obviously. That's always there. Then you have another reason, which is, people that, and, that have no skin in the game, that are, let's say, all American or all European or all South American, and they have no relationship to Palestinians or Israel or anything like that. And Israel has by far lost the PR war since October 7th. And no matter, and people, unfortunately, and the typical spokespeople for Israel, unfortunately, haven't really been giving emotionally satisfying answers to people that have no skin in the game and that are only emotionally invested in the war. So, for example, right, if someone does not care about Israel, it doesn't know anything about Israel, it does not care about Gaza, doesn't know anything about the Palestinians, and they're just tuning into the war, what you're going to, what they see, what objectively is happening is that there's been there was an attack, a terrible, terrible terrorist attack, and that attack was subsequently responded to by 2 years of absolute demolition. That's what they see, and the 2 years of absolute demolition has been covered like really almost no war before, obviously except for maybe Ukraine while it's going on. But some of the footage is real and some of the footage isn't, but enough of it is, and enough of it is off-putting enough and scary enough to people that in this war, you're like, okay, there's nothing left at Gaza. What are you still doing there? And people and people that have been representing Israel have done, the big public voices that have been representing Israel, I think have done a pretty terrible job at stepping up and providing both emotional and intellectual, political, whatever the word, just whatever facet you want to tackle this by. I don't think that the usual crew of pro-Israel people have been doing the job well, and I don't find myself very convinced by them either. And as someone that does support Israel and does love Israel and is Jewish, and I love the people and I love the place, and I don't know anything about I never knew anything about the government until a couple of years ago. I didn't even know how it worked until a year ago or so. Obviously, I'm not very invested in the government of Israel, but I'm invested in the well-being of it, and I really, really consider it a home. It's a place that I would absolutely move to, in my life, and it's something that I actually hope to do and to accomplish is to move there and live there. That being said, we're doing a really, really, really bad job in the PR war, and so you have anti-Semites that are just going to always be there, and then you have people that are not anti-Semitic. They're just not sure what the story is, and they've had no history, no involvement, no. They've never been invested before. They're just getting social media updates on TikTok and on Twitter, on X, and on Instagram, whatever it is, and they are, and then and you get someone who, and I don't even blame him for having his opinion, like Theo Vaughn or like Dave Smith, or that are openly talking about how terrible this is, and making, and unfortunately, people also have a hard time differentiating, between Israel and the government, and then the Jews around the world, and the people that live there, and all, and the rhetoric, and the slope starts getting slippery, and the rhetoric starts changing from the Israelis or the Israeli government to the Jews, or from Israeli government to Israelis think this, and this becomes an enormous danger that I think that we're all guilty of, which is when we label an entire country or city or town or state as just a state as opposed to an individual name, it becomes it becomes a lot easier to treat them as though they're not humans. This goes both ways in this war, with Palestinians and with Israelis. And I'm always making this point, and I always try to make this point, which is like when you hear a case about something about, someone dying, and you say, what happened? And like if the answer is, who cares? They're a Palestinian, that's not a good answer to me, And if the answer is, who cares? They're an Israeli, that's not a good answer. Or they're a Jew, that's a terrible answer to me, And so you always need the context. You can't, we lose the individual by the labeling. What if the Palestinian was just a regular dad and daughter and son, and and they were just just trying to live their lives and have a job and try to live regular lives, and they don't have it, and they didn't have this, and just because they live where they live or they're born where they were born, they get blown out of existence. That's a tragedy. That's a tragedy. And the Israeli and then the Israeli soldiers and the kids that that the 18-year-olds that have to get sent to war and they come back and they never come home, and the country of Israel is so small that everyone that they were related to like one out of every, or like either personally known or related to like one out of every like four or five people on the street. Every single death is a national tragedy, and like it and, my and I see my family feels that very strongly. My dad will take time. He isn't he's very invested. You hear news about death, you hear news about an accident, you hear news about something like that. Our immediate response, unless we feel personally invested, is almost to protect ourselves and to push aside that that thing and just say, oh, it happens in the world. I know that happens to me, right? I hear about a, a kid, God forbid, that died in was left in a hot car in the summertime, and God forbid a million times, and like I can't feel that too strongly. Like you have to separate, like in order to, like, because there's so much tragedy in the world and there's so many bad things that happen. If we settled on every single bad thing that happened to every single person in the world, we'd never be able to function. We'd never be able to live. And so like we have so human beings have almost like a hierarchy of emotion, of how much we're willing to get emotionally invested in something. And my dad gets emotionally invested in every single time that he hears about an 18, 19-year-old that gets that doesn't get to come home, or that hears about his family. My dad thinks about it and talks about it for far longer than anyone really around him is really comfortable talking about, and that shows how I how terrible, how sick, how awful war is. It shows how careless we become when we start talking about the death of people in numbers as though it doesn't mean anything, as though it's just a number, and it's not. Each one of these deaths isn't a best friend, isn't a parent, isn't a kid, from every side of the conflict, from every conflict. And you kind of hope, and almost like what we dream for is this world, and obviously this is romantic, and obviously this is naive, and obviously you could call this stupid, but I don't think that having a lofty goal is a bad thing. I think it's a really, really great thing to have a lofty goal, because then you could really never stop working until you're able to achieve it, and you're always trying to get better and better than where you are now. And I think that if we could be any better off than the answer is that's just what this is, does not really make me or anyone else, I don't think, feel better a lot of the times. It's just what it is, because when someone says that, like, well, how would you feel if it was your family? Would you say that's just how it is? What if it was me? I know that I wouldn't be okay with that. I know that I wouldn't be okay with the fact that if Florida got blown up right now because of this action, that because of a war, let's say that Trump started or that Biden started, or if something happens that my politicians or someone else decided, and my family gets blown up because of that, I don't want that. I don't want any of that. And unfortunately, I don't think there's been enough representation on the Jewish Israeli side that says this. And instead, a lot of the response is this, you're missing the bigger picture, you're missing the context, you don't really get what this is. And maybe like that I'm not even saying that the response is not right. What I'm saying is that it doesn't help. It doesn't help the argument. It doesn't help the case that you're trying to make, and it certainly doesn't help you make any friends. And that's why Dave Smith is wiping the floor with everyone that he argues against. That's why people like Ben Shapiro are starting to, like Ben Shapiro is being forced to acknowledge Dave Smith at this point, because he's just rocket shipping in popularity, because no one has anything to respond to him and no one has anything to say. And it's something that's so dramatically different than the status quo, because Israel and America have always had such a great relationship, as far as I've seen. And Tucker Carlson making Ted Cruz looking an idiot for 2 hours, is like that is not good. It's not. I don't think it's good for anyone. And I think that even refusing to acknowledge that Dave Smith is winning arguments, and refusing to acknowledge that Ted Cruz sounds like an idiot, and that Lindsey Graham sounds like an idiot when they, when they talk about war. If we don't acknowledge that, then we're losing. Then we lose the favor of, from what I've seen, a lot of my generation, say the 45 and under, the 50 and under, or even the 40 and under, let's just say, because I'm, between 30 and 40. Um, and the whole young generation, like the below 25-year-olds have a worse perspective on Israel than I think ever, I think in the last 50 years for sure. But like there's very, so I think it's a very scary time to be Jewish and to be Israeli and to be pro-Israel and to be, to support and love the land, because I think that we're going through a lot of challenges right now, and I hope that, and I hope that we can kind of get our act together and do a little bit of repair. I think that it's really, really terrible, and I think that the people that are the current spokespeople are doing a bad job, and I think that they should be replaced. I think that if anyone, if a couple of people, if a couple of people that no one had heard of a couple of years ago, that have no political history or no anything like that, and they're podcasters that have millions and millions of listeners together, and they're going, and these are the same people that helped, kind of reshape not only the election but the national, like the national mood in America. Podcasters had an enormous influence, far more than news outlets or typical corporate media. If they're all turning on Israel, we got to get new representatives that are going to that could say, hey man, that'll work with that, that will work, because I do think that, because I love Israel, I love, and I want us to have a good relationship with America for everyone's sake, and for the people that say that Israel doesn't provide anything to America, I would strongly urge you to do just a couple of quick Googles and just see what Israel provides in terms of technology, in terms of resources, in terms of what do you, I guess, research, in terms of, even like they have a good relationship with Russia and China too. Like it doesn't hurt to have a mutual friend with other world superpowers. So I think that, um, I think that we just need to. I think we have to be very careful as to what the public perception, especially in America and Europe, is of Israel. And I think we have to be very, very wary and very, very careful. And we really have to do a lot of damage control. Which obviously leads me to the next, I guess, topic on current events, and that is this war with Iran. And my take is this could be another potential, this already is, but could be even more, an enormous blow to the America-Israel relationship. And I know that a lot of people, a lot of Jews, a lot of, pro-Israel people are cheering on the fact that America got involved on Saturday and bombed those 3 nuclear facilities. And maybe it is a good thing. I hope and I pray and I want to hope that the legitimacy of the urgency of this attack is what everyone says that it is, or at least what Trump says it is. I really, really want to believe that, because right now what we're looking at is Iran has to retaliate against America. In fact, I just saw just a minute before I started recording this that Iran did retaliate, but apparently it was only like a quote unquote formal retaliation, that they actually called America and said, "Hey, this is where we're going to bomb or send a missile, and it's going to be at this and this time. So just get yourself ready for it, because we do have to respond to your attack." And hopefully that's considered a de-escalation and not taken by other people as an escalation, and I think that the fact that it's being already circulated around, both online on Twitter and in the news media. I hope that means that everyone will accept this to be kind of okay. Now we're even, and let things simmer down. If that's not the case, and Iran continues to strike at American bases and ends up killing Americans or servicemen or women, um, it could obviously escalate and escalate to the point of boots on the ground. Once you get boots on the ground, the country as a whole, America as a whole, does not have an appetite for another Middle Eastern war. They really don't. And if Americans now feel, which they almost certainly will, if boots hit the ground, if Americans feel that this war happened strictly because of Israel and there's no reason why America should be in it, then that is going to completely fracture at least a generation's worth of relationship with Israel, in my opinion, of America's relationship with Israel. And it's going to do so much, it could do so much potential harm. On the other hand, it could be, and I'm praying and I'm hoping that this is the case, it could be an amazing sign of legitimacy of Israeli intelligence. And one argument, and I actually been hearing, it's so funny because it's funny how like bits of information kind of come together throughout your life, and you kind of realize, and like you kind of start putting things together on your own. When I was growing up, my Saba, who is staunchly pro-Zionist as a Holocaust survivor, and I don't know anyone on this planet that would not that would not blame him or support him in his Zionism or understand his Zionism, um, for being a Holocaust survivor, and understanding his perspective that the Jews need a home in case something like this happens. My grandfather used to tell me periodically for literally for maybe 10, 15 years now. He used to tell me, he only died 2 or 3 years ago. Sorry about that. My wife just walked in with my baby. I had to cut out, but I'm going to continue my train of thought and say that this is an opportunity. If I'm praying and I'm praying and I'm hoping that Israel is able to provide. Oh, I'm so sorry. So the context. So my grandfather used to tell me throughout the rest of throughout my childhood about these systematic attacks that Israel has taken on Iran's nuclear facilities and potential and capabilities. And he used to talk to me about how great their intelligence was and how coordinated they were and how incredible it is, and it is. And so when people like Dave Smith or people on X make the talking point, or Tucker Carlson, I think made this argument, although I don't 100% remember. So if he didn't make that argument, I do apologize. Then but I thought I heard it. But one thing they point to is that Bibi has been saying since 1995, Iran is X, Y, and Z close to nuclear potential to create a bomb and to create a nuke, and we don't want that. And they are right that he's been saying that all along, but all along, Israel also has been carrying out strikes against scientists and at different locations, and so it keeps on having to set them back. So I think and unfortunately, I don't hear that. I don't hear that from Dave Smith or Glenn Greenwald or anything like that. And as much as I do appreciate that they usually do have excellent points and really fair perspectives, um, this particular case and point I think is not a correct one, and I don't think that it's necessarily fair to say, oh yeah, Bibi's been saying for 25 years that Iran can't have a bomb. Bibi's been doing things about it for 25 years. Israel's been doing about it things like that, and I just remember from hearing my whole life that, that Israel's just going and doing these operations. So I don't really know. What I really would love, and what I think really would be really super beneficial for America's relationship with Israel and Israel's credibility in the younger Americans' eyes, is to actually provide documentation and proof that they were intending on building a nuke and that they were planning on using it. And again, the issue that most Americans have right now is not whether or not Iran should have a nuke. Most Americans think that Iran should not have a nuke, but what they do think is that they don't want America involved in getting rid of that because it does not pose a threat necessarily to America at the moment. Iran can't really shoot a nuke further than France at the moment, so so it's not as much of a threat to us. Sorry, to Americans. But that being said, from an Israeli perspective, everyone understands that you can't have that having your neighbor with a nuke that historically hates you for being you, and for being the largest state sponsor of terrorism, with Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis and everyone, and just throughout the years. Obviously, I think everyone understands that Israel can't afford to have that and can't tolerate to have it. The big pushback is not that Israel should do it; it's that we don't want America to get drawn into another war. We don't want American troops to die, and we don't want we want an end to funding current wars. That's generally the degrees that that's what people cared about when Trump won, and that people wanted peace. People wanted the Ukraine war to be over, and people wanted the Israel war to be over, and for some reason, the forces that push this war and that push war in general, I think, are just far more difficult to get rid of than I think anyone had imagined. Um, So all this is really a premise to my trip to Israel because I'd never been to a country that had actually been through a war before. And now, again, I've visited Israel dozens of times in my life. I've spent a year and a half living there. I have family there. I have some of my best friends in the world there. Some of my best friends plan on moving there. I hope to move there, or at least buy property there in my life. Um, and, you know, And when I went, I'd never been to a country in the middle of a war before. And there was something that was really, really, really fascinating because um, you can really see, and I think Americans are missing out on this. I mean, you have such a small country, and 1,500 people die. And I know this is a point that people have heard a lot, especially right after October 7th, but almost everyone in Israel knew someone that gun kidnapped, killed, or hurt on October 7th. Because it's such a small country that everyone is everyone's only one or two steps removed from the other, and I mean, and you can go almost anywhere and find people in common that by 1 or 2 degrees, and it's really, really cool that way. But all over the country, there's just excuse me, signs and street art and posters that translate, into English. Together we'll be successful. Bring them home now, and there's a real sense of. It's so interesting. There's a sense of soberness that even when that even when people are partying and having a good time, it almost feels like it's out of a state of defiance. It's really, really fascinating. And maybe this is just my own head. Maybe this is just me misunderstanding and misinterpreting what I was seeing. But I was all over Israel. I was in Rehovot. I was in Beit Shemesh. I was in Jerusalem. I was in Tel Aviv. I was on the beaches. I was there for like 5 days. I was all over the place, and we had a car. And Israel's a really easy country to get around when you have a car. Public transportation just tends to take a lot longer, of course, and so we got to see a lot of different people in a lot of different environments throughout the country at different points of the day. During the day, at restaurants or bars or cafes and coffee shops and little shooks or marketplaces, and then at night with the clubbing scene. And during the day, there's kind of a sense of family, community, and sobriety. It feels like, at least that's what it felt like. And then when people are having a good time, Thursday nights, or you go to a bar, there's always a sense and awareness in everyone's mind that a siren could go off, which it did. Like I was in Jerusalem with my friend Zach and Avrami, and we were having a great time, had a bunch of beers, ripped a couple of, arak and bad vodka shots, and we're sitting down about to pound a couple of boxes of wings and poppers. And, we're having the best time in the world, and music's blasting, and there's a DJ, and kids are dancing in the street. And, and then a siren goes off. And, there's obviously two reactions. There's one reaction is to go to the nearest shelter, and then the other reaction is screw this, man. You're not gonna scare us into going. It tends to be more of a younger person and older person's perspective. I think the youth out of ignorance and the elder out of defiance. I think, but you're not gonna make me live X, Y, and Z, like live like this and run out of my bed every night of my life. But there's a sense of it was really really fascinating to spend 5 days living like a local, among people that were in a country in war, and and like it's a topic of events. It's a I mean, for example, the day of Remy's wedding, my buddy, that's what I went to Israel for. The day of his wedding, we went to grab brunch, grab a coffee, and on the way back, we saw another car that was decorated for a wedding. In Israel, they just take any car that you have and just decorate it with, they paint on it and they put some ribbons and some, I forgot, they just decorate it. And I was like, oh, and I said in Hebrew because I speak Hebrew. I was like, oh, that's for my friend over here. And she's like, haha. I'm like, no, really, he's getting married today. He showed her his invitation, and she was, and she was giving, and she was laughing, and she was wishing him the best, and and she was, and like, and just the mood changed while she was talking, while we were talking. She, just like, when you get married in Judaism, it's like you're starting your life over again, and you're starting with a fresh, clean slate. All your sins have been forgotten, and when you pray, um, you're praying as if you're a new person, a new human being, because you're about to start a whole new life and a new entity and a new family. And so you're starting from scratch. And she's like, and you should just pray that like all our family comes back and no one else gets hurt anymore, and that this war should end. And that was just one example, and everyone just got emotional, and everyone kind of, I'm never going to see her again, and I've never seen her before, but there was this real sense of like camaraderie and love and sadness, and and just a desire for peace. That it was really really overwhelming, and it was really really beautiful. And I think that, and I don't think that enough people kind of hear that or see that, or really feel or experience that real depth of just communal and family pain that a whole country could just feel at one time together. It was really, 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 really beautiful. Um, but enough about that, because that's a charged topic that I always feel like I'm falling over myself when I'm talking about it, because I don't want to say the wrong thing, upset the wrong people, even though, I don't know why I should be entitled to my own ideas. But, whenever you have your own idea, you end up pissing off someone. So, yeah, we flew actually. So the day before Israel responded to Iran, Zach and I flew to Amsterdam for 2 days, and I've got to say, man, they're doing something right over there. I loved that. I loved Amsterdam. I've been to more than half the states in the country at this point. I've probably been to like 65-70% of the states, if not more. And I've been to Italy, I've been to Greece, I've been to Israel, I spent the day in Barcelona. Granted, it was after Amsterdam, but I've never visited a place that just like resonated with me. First of all, I think it's super underrated, and no one talks about the fact that Amsterdam is on canals, and everything there is just bridges. And there's such a amazing, poetic, romantic feel to the place that, you everyone goes everywhere on bikes, because the roads are extremely thin and they're all cobblestone, and I don't think the infrastructure was really ever built to support as many cars as you would need for the amount of people that live there. And everyone goes everywhere on bikes. And so just the combination between all these little bridges that go over canals every couple of blocks, and families biking together and kids on the street by themselves, and then you have a ton of these little cobblestone alleyways between these cities. It was just so magnificent. It was so cool to go to, and that's all aside from the coffee shop scene, which obviously I had a great time with. The architecture I thought was beautiful, and like as far as the city goes, it does a cool job blending the feeling of suburbia, and being like kind of family oriented, or at least being comfortable having kids walk around and being by themselves, and actually being a city. I took a river tour, a riverboat tour, whatever it's called, with Zach. And while we were on the tour, we were talking to, I guess, the tour guide, who is a new university graduate. And she was telling us a little bit about Amsterdam. And one of the problems that she was telling us that exists is that apparently housing is a nightmare there, and that there's really no more land to kind of build on, and there's people keep on coming to be there. Um, and there's wait lists for apartments, and there's wait lists for homes, and they're just an absolute fortune. Um, I don't really know what to think about that, or to really make of that. Um, I mean, I guess it's not too different from like a place like Manhattan, where just because of how it's not really due to a shortage of apartments. It's kind of due to a enormously expensive cost of living, but that people are kind of forced to live together. And I didn't think really that it works so well for people living in Manhattan. I feel like it kind of makes New Yorkers a little bit, what makes them crazy is part of just like being confined to such a small place with so many people around you constantly. But apparently, on a little bit of a smaller scale, it does not drive you all crazy. And the people of Amsterdam were so kind and so nice and so friendly. We went to a coffee shop and got a tea, got a smoke, and I was like, and I asked the barista, could we smoke inside, or should we sit outside? He's like, sit whatever you want. Um, and I said to Zach, "Oh, I'd love to go outside." And the people outside heard. There's only one table outside with 4 seats, and there's two women there, and the women heard and just moved over. And then when we poked our head outside to see if there was any place to sit, they're like, "Oh, we heard you say you want to come outside. We just made some room if you want." And that was it. And I was like, that never. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm crazy, but maybe I'm hanging out in the wrong places. But that would never happen in the States. Um, so I'm walking away with raving reviews about Amsterdam. I love the place. People told me to be careful about being Jewish there. I didn't really get that vibe. Oh, and the Heineken was awesome on tap. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Um, obviously not the most craft, or the most complex or complicated beverages out there, but phenomenal on tap, and everything was pretty decently priced. Oh, except for these health snacks that I bought. I bought like healthy chips that was with avocado oil, um, and a pack of mixed nuts. And I didn't even look at it, because especially so in Israel, I think it's like 3.7 or 3.5 shekel to a dollar. So everything, so you're paying 12 shekel for a Coke, even though it's really $3. It just feels like you're giving a lot of money over for that. And so I don't think my brain had completely finished translating, or trying to translate the currency over from one cost to another. And so I saw like 38, and I thought that was like, oh wow, okay, so it's like 12, $15. That's not bad. And I realized it was 38 euro, and I was like, oh man, what for three? I still don't know how it happened exactly, and if you think that's crazy, I'll have to take that up with Zach, who wouldn't let me return it. So that's just some thoughts for my most recent solo episode. I kind of wanted to get the stream of consciousness out. I wanted to get some of my thoughts out, and we're going to have another episode tomorrow. I'm really, really excited. Super cool dude, from what I can tell. My buddy Guy Levy introduced me to him. He's an aviator. He's a martial artist. He is a health nut. I'm really excited to talk to him. and a couple of more fun episodes coming up for you guys this week. Hope you enjoyed, and bye for now.